Good evening, Galaxy fans. Good evening, Galaxy fans. This is Mike Gray from The Striker. I cover both the Galaxy and LEFC. Here to help me out is my main man, my co host. Say hi to Alex Ruiz.
Hello, everybody. I finally made it big now. I've got the big headphones, so we're a serious podcast now.
Oh, yeah. Top of the line. Those obviously must have cost hundreds of dollars. Very
They
expensive,
were a
right?
gift. I just use these when I play video games. I lost my other headphones, so I'm just using this for now. So I've been gaming a lot recently, so
Well,
just gotta pick them up.
they suit you well, Alex.
I appreciate that, Mike.
Probably doing better than me. I hurt my back yesterday.
Yikes! From what?
Too much working out. Too much being a meathead at the gym. Trying
The
to,
the grind caught up with you.
yeah, the grind, man. It's tough, especially when you're old and washed. So I mean, it is what it is.
Mike is finished, guys. Mike is
Uh,
finished.
I had a good run.
Season-ending injury? Are we gonna? Is that what we're categorizing this?
Well, is this gonna be like Bond, where we say it's like 2 to 4 weeks, and then 2 months later, it's
Like a
like,
month and a half, and he's still not.
yep, 2 to 4 weeks, day to day. All it's all the same thing, really. Well, things are going well. Let's just get to it. The Force was not with the Galaxy on Star Wars night. Greg Vanny decided to put out a 4-4-2 formation. I just want to get right to it. He put out a 4-4-2 formation diamond with he had Ricky behind the two strikers, Gaston Brugman to the left, Mark Delgado to the right, and Uri Resolve, his first start of the season, behind everybody. Uh, for the first 20 minutes or so, it worked pretty well, as you might expect with, when you tended to play an experimental formation. The Galaxy had possession, they were recycling the ball. If they weren't creating clear cut chances, they were doing a good job of moving the ball around. And, at some point, things just fell off a bit. But before that happened, Alex, Galaxy gave up what was a pretty crappy goal.
Yeah, it's off a set piece. Definitely the blame's gonna go on Jonathan Klinsmann for not calculating that ball right. At the end of the day, the goalkeeper always has to be in control of their box in the area, especially on corner kicks. And Jonathan Klinsmann right there. I just don't know because it would be interesting to hear his train of thought of why to come out for that. Obviously, misses it completely. And Lawless Abubakar just jumps over Caligari. And Caligari isn't a tall guy who's going to win a lot of aerial duels. So the minute you kind of saw that, you were like, oh, shoot. Now there's nobody in goal. And Abubakar is just going to dunk on this guy. And that's essentially what happened. And, like you said, Mike, the Galaxy were doing good in the first 5 minutes. I mean, we've seen this diamond midfield for the Galaxy team, obviously with the last season with different players. But it worked well. It was a formation that got the Galaxy the ball. And, unfortunately, they weren't able to finish or create much. But they were a good dominant possession team like we know them to be. But this time, it felt like you just had those 5 minutes of magic and it all went away. Having Yuri Rosell come in, I don't really think he did too much in this game. He was, only 45 minutes played. Definitely disappointing. You'd expect, Brugman and Delgado having more freedom to push up. Brugman didn't look too good in the attack. Whenever he was on that left hand side trying to move the ball forward, it just didn't look right. He's those guys who can facilitate the play, not create the play. So I think having him in that position didn't get the best out of him. Delgado always covers on the right, and he was good covering ground, all the little things that he does. Having Caligari there push up there as well was helpful. But again, this diamond formation just didn't really do much for the Galaxy team. And I understand, Vanny said post game that Tyler Boyd was kind of dealing with something, which is one of the reasons why he didn't start this game. Interestingly enough, as well, Jalen Neal didn't start this game. Sega Koulibaly getting his first start of the season, so it was really unfortunate to see him go down in the first half. Jalen, I think Vanny said Jalen's been really good on the ball, but he wanted to see a bit more physicality, and that's kind of why Sega was brought into the game. And he is the bigger, more physical, aerial dominant center back compared to Jalen Neal. I mean, no disrespect to Jalen, but when it comes to that part of his game. There's so much that needs to be worked there physically. He's not the biggest kid. He's tall, but I feel like he doesn't have that athleticism like a Koulibaly, somebody who's bigger, who can jump. Obviously, there's still so much time, and he's still very young, and his body is still growing. So I think he'll definitely develop that part of his game. But right now, it's not there, and I understand Vanny's train of thought about wanting to start Koulibaly. Unfortunately, another center back goes down. He's going to be out for a bit. You already have Chris Mavinga out for a bit as well. And, obviously the one of the big talking points now with the Under-20 World Cup is, Jalen Neal likely not going. I think this injury cemented him not going to that tournament now because the Galaxy don't really have any depth. It's just at this point, because for Vanny did say for Kranis and Cuevas would be going because, they're not playing much. And in the case of Cuevas, he's still integrating with the team. So now your center backs are Martin Cáceres, Jalen Neal, and Eric Zavaleta. I don't know if I'm forgetting anybody, but I think that's about it. So, that first half definitely, was one to forget.
Yeah, Javi was quite upset. We'll talk more about that later post game. But one of the things that he brought up was mentality. And the Galaxy were playing very well, but then they had several, not just one, but several unforced defensive errors. I mean, it was Ricky Pujol people that ended up causing that corner kick, and then you saw what happened, obviously, with them scoring. And you're right, the formation, the diamond, it just didn't work. To be fair to, Matt Doyle over at MLS Soccer, he brought up the fact that it wasn't necessarily the 4-4-2 that doomed the Galaxy as much as it is, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but the Galaxy have to stop where putting out one formation and then switching it to the 3-5-2 at halftime. You got to have some continuity, and again, we can talk about that later. But as far as the diamond, you're right about Brugman. The first 20 minutes or so, he looked uncomfortable. He looked like someone who looked like he was just sort of dancing around a position as opposed to playing it naturally. And then Vanny brought this up. Brugman started just kind of running all over the place, trying to just, I guess, capture his natural instincts, which is to just sort of, gather the ball and possess and be a facilitator. And then that, there was one play towards the end of the half where he wasn't in position, and the Rapids just had that whole side of the field just waiting for him. And, it was disappointing because, like you said, it didn't work, and then they scored, and after the 20-minute mark, the Rapids figured it out. They're good at man marking and frustrating their opponents, and you saw that with Brugman. But then Cabral almost had the goal of the season. He played the ball over Koulibaly. He drifts centrally with it. Somehow, it cuts inside, and then he cuts inside on Ade, and then the final finish wasn't there. But man, that was. Galaxy fans are living in a special hellscape right now. Kevin Cabral is making them look bad. I think Joe Tutino said on the broadcast that was the best work that he's seen in 2 years from him or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, it was pretty funny. Let's move on to something that was a bit of a hot topic. The Angel City Brigade had their much anticipated return to the stands after previously boycotting for like the first 6-8 weeks or so. And it was interesting because this is the first time that the ACB have been on Apple TV, and they've been getting a lot of credit for being good at capturing the supporters and the mood of the stadium. So you're expecting it to be loud, and then also you're expecting ACB themselves to be pretty loud because let's face it, they're facing some adversity right now, and this was kind of their opportunity to show everybody what they're about. And from that perspective, I thought it was pretty loud at first. You had like a few like sort of jeers, I guess, from like maybe people who just for whatever reason aren't happy with the ACB. But then you heard this loud sort of ovation from the crowd, just sort of a recognition that hey, we're back. And then for the first 15-20 minutes or so, it was rocking. But after that goal, it did kind of settle down a little bit, which was it's a little disappointing. That's another thing that there's a lot of stuff that we're gonna get to at the back end of the show, and so that's just my opinion on that. But I mean, I'll tell you what. By the end of the half, Cosmo was banging the sign again, which
he was still doing that for a bit of the game.
Yeah. So I guess let's move on to the second half. Alex, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but do you think that there's been too much tinkering from Vanny over the past, course of the season? Actually,
Yeah, I
I
really
see you
agree
looking up.
with that.
I see you
I
looking up.
mean, yeah, I mean, you know me, Mike. These last 2 years since Vanny's taken over, I've advocated for the 3-5-2. It's constantly been something, a talking point that I've reiterated many times, whether it be on social media, on my articles on the striker. I'm always, or even if you see me in person, like I'll tell you, like the 3-5-2 is the way to go. Shout out to a couple of fans that are listeners to the podcast who I met at the stadium. Got to say hi to them, and it was nice. So shout out to you guys. Thanks for listening and all. But yeah, the 3-5-2. It's just something that for me, when I look at this roster, I'm the type of guy. I know I'm not a coach or a sporting director or whatever, but when I go and look at a team, I examine its strengths. I examine the places that you can get the most potential out of, and the places that need the most support. We know this Galaxy team defensively has needed that support. Three at the back. That's my, and I know it's not that easy to say, but three in the back with three natural center backs, I think is the best possible thing the guys can do. Especially considering they have a lot of guys who are good on the ball, but I feel like they need just a guy who's good defensively, who is big, who is not afraid to get into tackles. That type of player is what I'm talking about. They need there, and when I'm looking at potential fullbacks, they got young. Players with youth international pedigree out there, like you need to be starting with wingbacks in this game, and they're arguably the best, with providers on this team. Tyler Boyd when he came on in the second half was really lively, really good, got into really great crossing positions, and the guys were totally missing that, considering they had basically four central midfielders, players who are naturally center midfielders, kind of playing out there. Tyler Boyd found the good pockets, found the good outlets to where to get balls and where to make his runs. Um, but you just have one guy like that. If you're gonna play with a winger system, you need at least two, and the Galaxy don't have that. Use your wing backs to create those crossing outlets, that width, and kind of push up the field. And again, in the modern game, everybody pushes up, so it's not like you can be like, oh, you're gonna get exposed. Everybody does that in today's game. Strikers, we can talk about it. Chicharito, Joveljic really struggled on the night. I thought Chicharito was really poor. Some of his touches were just really bad, or the communication and chemistry with other guys just wasn't there. He tried to play a couple of balls off and try to lay it off, but his passes just weren't there. Players weren't in the right position, and it was a real struggle there to kind of build some actual momentum. The first 20 minutes of the first half were really good from the Galaxy. Like I said, Tyler Boyd provided some of that liveliness. You saw a little bit more openness and passing from Ricky Puig and the other midfielders. But just those chances, there's a good, ball Tyler Boyd put into the box and nobody could get a head on. And that's one chance that I'm thinking, if you can just get that in, it's a completely different game. It's 1-1. And, you have a chance to, with supporter groups back into the stadium, with fans that, want to see the team second win of the season. That opportunity right there, if you put that away, completely changes the game in my opinion. And once the Galaxy had 20 minutes of that frustration, where they were kind of just doing everything but just not the final product, it felt like emotionally the Galaxy just, not that they gave up, but like that was just too much. And you could tell, once Cabral got his goal, some of the frustration, you could kind of see it on the field. Everybody tried to do too much. And, eventually Colorado kind of got more control of the game. And, Jonathan Lewis scores the third goal and, the half's over. And fortunately, there's a Preston Judd consolation goal. Congratulations on his first goal. I feel with so much being talked about this team's loss, I think it was really good to see him score. He really struggled and, had a lot of chances so far this season to get his first goal. Couldn't do it, but, did it in this game. Unfortunately, it's just a consolation goal and nothing else. So, like Tyler Boyd's goal in El Trafico, it was great to see, but at the end of the day, this team wants results, and that's what matters.
Yeah, Alex, let me hit you up with another question because we've got a very confused fan base and we've got a very smart pundit over here. So, how much of this do you think is Vanny's fault versus a team personnel issue? Because I mean, if you take stock in what Vanny's saying, and we both have a lot of faith in the manager. To be fair to him, he's probably saying, okay, I put out the 3-5-2 at halftime, and we still got outscored 2-1. Our rest defense is horrible, and again, that's a situation where is it him or is it the pieces that he has? Because that's been an issue with the Galaxy for a very long time.
Yeah, you can kind of say 50-50 on this because look, Greg Vanny has the squad, the players that fit his system, right? Ricky Puig, Gaston Brugman, Jalen Neal coming up, perfect center back to have on that team, right? Ball playing guy who's good on the ball. You kind of saw that during the season. I think you've seen that difference between Neal and Koulibaly when it comes to having the ball at their feet. Neal is just much more comfortable at that. Having Julian Aude, right? Caligari, a guy that they've had on the radar for a while because they anticipated Julian Araujo being gone. Dejan Joveljic, Tyler Boyd. He was a player that Vanny was trying to get in his first year in charge of the club. Couldn't do it, and then eventually got him this season. So he's a Vanny guy, and you see that his guys are great players. They do fit the system well, and they provide a lot of what Vanny is looking for. But at the same time, you can kind of just see these deficiencies when it comes to the not the strengths of any sides, which are when you're off the ball, when you're defending in transition, and when you are on, I wouldn't say high pressure situations, but when there's an urgency, it feels like this team does everything but just the final step. Like they get there, and emotionally it's it costs a lot for them because they're getting there, they're seeing those chances fly by, but they just can't do it. So I wouldn't necessarily put all the blame on Vanny, but at the same time you gotta note, this guy's been in charge of the club for 3 years now. He Most of his guys from year one are gone. All the French players that he got except Koulibaly are gone. I mean Koulibaly's hurt, right? Raveloson gone, Grancier gone. Cabral, scored against them, and probably one of his best games of the year. Also, if you missed it, or were living under a rock, his little brother scored, right? Remy Cabral for Colorado too against LA Galaxy too. So that those brothers got their revenge on LA. But like I'm saying, I don't want to place it all on Vanny because he's doing everything he can, and he has the
Agreed.
pieces to do that. We've seen this team play really good soccer. It's not like it's been 3 years of mediocre soccer for these past games and starts of the season. Just right now, this moment is just really bad, and it kind of just highlighting really the big deficiencies in Vanny systems. Like I said, how they play off the ball. This team off the ball just is completely different. How they are in transition defense, defending, and just the reliance on possession and having to get that ball constantly all the time, and needing to have the perfect ball and the perfect play to get that opportunity to score. So
I,
like you said, Mike. I believe it in Greg, and I think he's a good manager. I think he's building a good foundation for the club. But obviously, these questions are going to pop up when you're tied for last place in the Western Conference.
Yeah, well, I don't think he hates the 3-5-2. I just think he hates having a two forward setup. And what we've seen through the first 10 games, and to Vandy's credit, he acknowledged this. You're right. The players are extremely frustrated, and the reason for that is because you have all these talented players out there I mean, the Galaxy lead the league in possession. They know how to play with the ball. They're very, crafty, but the Galaxy aren't specializing in anything right now. They're not good at creating clear-cut chances. They're not creating goals. They're not scoring goals. They're not keeping clean sheets. They're not defending well, at least not well enough to get results. Dayon has been non-existent this year. I'm sorry. Where's his production? It's been non-existent. And look at Cheech, 1 goal, right? So there's a lot of things you can point to where Vanny might say, hey, the two forward, formation, regardless of if it's a 4-4-2 or 5-3-2, isn't going to work. I have a lot of sympathy with him for that. But the question is, and this is where it kind of sucks because, I mean, you're right. It's not his fault. It's 50-50. It's a personnel issue, but that's what sucks about taking on a sporting director role because your president got caught for cheating. All of a sudden, you're the big guy who's in charge of the ship, and if something goes wrong, it's your fault. So,
That, and
uh,
also like their transfer targets have been really hard to kind of hit on, right? Gruel, the guy who's playing in Austria, right, couldn't get him because his club didn't want to let him go. Ademir, the Brazilian winger, another club bought him because they had a more enticing offer. Obviously, with MLS salary cap rules, it's hard to get those kind of players. Um, they had an open designated player spot open for months. They could have gotten another, young DP. They could have gotten it, filled it with another player, and obviously, I'm not saying Ricky Puig doesn't deserve being a DP because he does. But the fact that it took almost until the last week of, the week before the first game of the regular season for him to be announced as the DP, feels like kind of, not defeat, but it felt like a consolation. We couldn't get that player. We couldn't bring somebody in to help the winger side. In that 4-3-3 that excelled so much for this Galaxy team last year. But we just have to. I don't want to give it a negative connotation because again, Ricky Puig is worthy of being a DP, but they had to settle for Ricky being the third DP just mere days before the start of the regular season. So from that end, it was definitely very disappointing as well, and that's kind of something I would point at as well to being one of the reasons why the Galaxy just aren't good this year.
That VV signing last day was extremely disappointing. There's no getting around that. And then, to just sort of back up what we were talking about a minute ago, two managers got let go today. Gerhard Struber and Ezra Henriksen, who, by the way, I love that guy. I've got a pair of his player shorts, like from back in the day, from when they won the MLS Cup in 2002. I've got his like practice shorts in my closet, so just humble brag. But yeah, but what I'm getting at is especially for the Fire and Ezra, the complaints from everyone was, hey, you have a poor GM. You haven't been able to. You have good homegrowns, but you haven't hit on your DPS at all. And so, yeah, if you want to be an elite club, you gotta hit on your DPS, and you gotta have a good front office, and there's no getting around that. Um, yeah, like I said, post game, Vanny, he was very hard. He spoke about having a hard reassessment about whether the two striker system can work, whether it was even viable or realistic. I think the group's trying too hard, which you touched on, and then, like I said, haven't been good enough to prevent goals nor score goals on a consistent basis. And then we have Chicharito, who I've never seen him so low in a locker in a post game situation before. I mean, he didn't he always wants to answer questions, but that no one wants to talk more than Javi. And then you had a situation where we were answering him questions, and it almost as if he was just being very curt with his answers. I don't know. I don't know. This has to change. That has to change. He was a bit all over the place. He spoke about how the same people are speaking to the media afterwards. This may or may not be a shot at Chris Klein. Personally, I think he was just talking about his teammates. I don't think the Galaxy players are that far ahead. I don't think they're thinking about the boycott. I think they're just focusing on the field. And which I mean, when you hear them talk about it pretty consistently, they're talking about the boycott as if they're a part of it, which I ought to tell you that like they're seeing it from like they're from a distance. So, but yeah, I think it was very emotional in the moment. But I'm gonna boomerang this a little bit because I mean, for me, I think that this is a great positive. Uh, as negative as we've been about this whole session, just talking about how bad things are, so on and so forth, you know, everyone's saying that the ship's going down and everything. I don't think the Galaxy are in as bad a situation as people are making out to be. Um, if there are some positives, I do think the team is behind them. I don't know if it's 100%. I don't think it's hard to find 100% unity in any locker room, but I do think that the team's behind them. I think Cheech's emotional response reflects that. And if you read between the lines from what Greg Vanny has been talking about, and even with Saturday's post-game presser, he knows what the problems are. He's not in denial. He's not bullshitting anybody. Excuse my language. So these are signs that even though the team is just in a kind of a death spiral right now, they are in a situation where they're only maybe one win away from turning things around. But what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna be a busy month. I mean, just this Wednesday they have the Open Cup game, so
Hmm.
I'll be there to cover that, and I think it'll be a fun game. Obviously, these games against the Sounders are always kind of intense and very close. But right now, this team this month is going to be the month where they choose their destiny for the rest of the season. Lots of games. Their depth will truly be tested. And I think this is the moment where you need to accumulate points. This is the moment where you need to be able to show up and be able to kind of grind your way out through these games. Again, this Galaxy team tries to play pretty soccer all the time a lot. And Greg Vanny talked about how they can sometimes be their worst enemy in trying to do that and trying to make the play in 5, 6 passes, right? They don't need to do that. Every victory counts the same. It's 3 points. I think if you're the Galaxy, you need to approach this like you're in a relegation battle in some way. I kind of asked Gaston Brugman about it. He's
I
been in a
like that.
relegation battle for a while in his career in Parma. And, I obviously didn't want to be disrespectful towards him. I think he might have taken some disrespect to it. But I just wanted to talk to him about that because that's a difficult situation because there's a lot at stake. Your career essentially, the futures of the team, of the coaches. That's a similar situation where the Galaxy are right now, even though we don't have relegation. And, with all these games piling up, you've got to be able to grind it out. And, Gaston kind of just said, like, look, this team isn't dead. We're alive still. And I think that was such a good quote to get from him because, again, he's been in these situations. He's gone down to Serie B with Parma. So he knows the desperation and the feelings inside a locker room when, those bad, rock bottom low situations. So with a player of his experience getting to say that, now it's time to prove that this locker room is alive, that this team is alive, and there's no better time to do it than with a good run in the Open Cup, and getting a good amount of points this month. Make sure that you don't create an unnecessary large gap between a playoff spot and not a playoff spot. Be in contention for number 9. The last playoff spot at the number 9 position. As long as you're in contention for that by around June, there's still a lot of time left in the season, and there's still going to be plenty of time to possibly, although it'd be very rough, climb up and see if you can get a home game. But as long as the guys can stay close, can be in contention for those playoff spots, like Gaston said, this team is alive.
Yeah, it's interesting. They could either use the momentum from the Open Cup against Seattle, or they could, do it the other way around and, put out a decidedly second string lineup, and then that way, that's one less competition they have to worry about for the end of the season. I mean, you could go either way. I mean, honestly, if you look at LA, they don't have any summer transfers, so you got to be you got to be more careful than usual when it comes to having your star players out there. Any Open Cup game that's on turf, I would say don't put, Javi or anyone who could potentially, go down. And then Seattle, they've always had a strong history of competing hard in the Open Cup. They had that run from 2009 to 2014 where they won it 4 times in 6 years. So it'll be interesting to see this battle. I think if the Galaxy put out a lineup to keep it close, they should go for it. That's just my suggestion. And then Alex, I think we're going to end tonight on a bit of a down note, but it is something that we do need to discuss. Let's see. Well, do I have it right here? Yeah. There's a bit of a rift in the supporters boycott and sort of the back and forth. Long story short, someone snuck a Lars diss into the ACB tifo, the Star Wars themed tifo. Instantly, there was a big reaction online. Folks were mad, pointing fingers, et cetera, et cetera. My criticism of the incident is, ever since the ACB announced that they were going back to the stands, there's been zero communication from leadership or anyone else in terms of, the communication's been poor to non-existent. And then on top of that, there's been zero urgency to put out fires, when bad news comes up. And, this happened and then it exploded online. And, something that I predicted when this boycott first started is that, the spotlight was going to be on Klein, but eventually it was going to shift to other parties. And right now it's on the ACB in a very serious way and in a way that maybe they haven't experienced before. And, now that the spotlight's on them, we're finding things we don't like. I mean, the tax thing was just sort of a bad it's a bad look. When you owe $30,000 in taxes, that makes people wonder whether you're serious or not. And when I saw the TIFO thing, I took it a little personally because I stood with the ACB for 5 years, and every once in a while I tell people, yeah, I used to stand with them. So it's a little bit embarrassing being associated with that garbage, and from talking to other supporters, leaders of other supporters, I mean, we don't know what happened to the people who messed with the TIFO and snuck in that 138, which was, 138 is Lars section. So it's, in other words, it's pointing them out. But, if it were me, if I were in another supporters group, I would want them to get kicked out of the group. That's just my opinion. But I mean, imagine being a supporter of another group like Lars or Galaxy Ultras or whatever, and then knowing that the ACB has members in their group that just despise you, knowing after that. I mean, and then I don't want to compare the groups, but I see what Lars is doing. They're gonna have an online forum this upcoming Friday, and it's gonna be purely to just address concerns, talk to fans. There's a lot of fans who want to be educated about the boycott. Maybe they want to participate in it, and I just personally, I was just very disappointed in that reaction. And if I'm the ACB, I might want to hire a PR comms person,
Get an
just some,
intern.
please, for the love of God, because I mean, like, this is just bad. Like, and I have so many friends that are ACB and Lars, and like, 90% of us just want to move past this. And at the end of the day, it's a few dudes who probably did that thing anyway, right? But we need some leadership, guys. Please, I'm begging you.
I mean,
So
this kind of sums up the Galaxy situation, not just on the team, but like everywhere in Galaxy Land. I mean, having kind of this infighting between the supporter groups, this separation of the unity that, they had at the start of the protest. Like, there was some solidarity there that, I called the, biggest moment in LA Galaxy history. The fact that they were going to plan to protest the entire season. They broke off. It caused a lot of other kind of connections and that bond to kind of break off as well. I mean, you're also kind of having as well all the fans kind of voice their frustrations with the "We want better" chants and Klein out chants towards the end of the game. All the fans that left the stands early. I mean, from the press box, you get a really good view of not just the field but just the movement at Dignity Health Sports Park. And by the 85th minute, I think it was, just the floods of people heading towards the exits. It was so noticeable, and it just sums up the situation of the frustration of kind of dealing with all this, the team's performance, the drama off the field with supporters, kind of becoming your worst enemy. That's kind of what what ACB is kind of becoming, their worst enemy in a way, with all these kind of, I won't say I don't want to be strong and say they're making the wrong decisions, but these decisions are highly questionable, and that's why I'm saying they're becoming their own worst enemy. So just a lot of division, and it's definitely a good temperature check of where the LA Galaxy is right now. So it's all not well, and again, time will tell what happens. It's a story that's going to be chronicled a lot this year on this podcast, and something that years down the line we'll probably still be talking about because it's that big and within the fans, the community, and the club's history.
before we take off, Alex, time for a few comments. Jose Perez. I've only been a fan of the Galaxy since 2016, and all I've known is pain and disappointment. Feel you, dog.
I know. I mean, that was me actually. I didn't become a Galaxy fan until like 2015, 2016. So I wasn't like, I knew the Galaxy won championships and I was aware of that, but I wasn't like, invested like I was as a fan growing up. So, I can kind of relate to that. I remember, I think my first Galaxy game with my whole family was like during that wooden spoon year. Obviously not the best time to, kind of go out and enjoy a game, but I can kind of relate to that, man. It's definitely kind of changes your perspective a little bit. Because I always hear from Mike and all the other people, oh, this, when we won championships, all these stories, right? It feels like I don't know, it's a different feeling for me because I wasn't necessarily as invested as they were back when they were winning championships. So
Well,
it's
the
definitely
vibe.
a different experience from that perspective, and I get that from whoever commented that.
Well, the vibe sucks because I mean, I bring this up a lot about how the fans aren't having fun. Like, you can support a bad team and then still go to the games and like
Yes,
have
exactly.
fun.
Exactly. It's not like, you're not having a good time. Just obviously the results on the field aren't ideal. And obviously when you're a team that's storied and has a pedigree, and you're not seeing that since you became a fan, and that's all you've kind of heard and it's been repeated over and over, I can understand that frustration and that, like, what am I doing kind of feeling, I guess. So
It's
it's
dude,
definitely
it's
interesting because there's gonna be a whole generation of Galaxy fans that didn't see this team win championships, and with how good LAFC is doing, and there's a real possibility that people change alliances, and that happens.
well, that's already happened in some quarters, but
Oh yeah,
yeah,
trust me. But that's for another day. Discussion for another day.
dude, when we came back from the COVID in 2021, like I felt like Disneyland just walking around the concourse and just talking to fans and stuff. Like it felt so good to be back at games, and
Oh yeah.
there was other stuff going on, and like it was just there was just so much fun. And then now it's like it's
Those are
like going
simpler times.
it's like going I know, right? Now it's like, oh man, when I don't even want to say high school, it's worse than high school, but like yeah, I just when I go to the stadium, like, oh, I want to bring this up because you know, not to get all sappy and stuff, but I was sad on Twitter because uh, Lars had a First Friday event where they went bowling, and just on social media, you could just tell everyone had like a really good time, and you know, it hurt, man, like it really hurt because there's all these friendly faces, all these, you know, there's friends, there's acquaintances, there's online friends, there's people you want to meet, there's people, you know, so many different personalities, and we don't get to see any of them because they're all boycotting. So, you know, that was my chance. I missed it for personal reasons. But yeah, I couldn't make it, and then I'm sitting there going, this is my one chance to hang with all these dudes and dudettes, and it didn't happen. And now it's just, ugh, let's just bring everyone back into the stadium. Let's work something out. So, guys, it's 7:08. We overshot our load apparently. So we are taking off. I'm Mike Gray. I cover both the Galaxy and LAFC for the Striker. This is my faithful co-host, the main man, the big dog, Alex Ruiz. Take it easy, everybody.